These three things are things that I have found work best for us for mulching. Number one is just mulch up leaves. We have a lot of trees on our property, so we get a lot of fallen leaves. I love to mulch them up and just use them in the garden. We still get random blades of grass come through, but you can see that the majority of this bed doesn't really have grass coming through. Every now and then we get some, like on the edges here, where this Bermuda grass especially likes to push its way up through the leaves. The leaves break down and turn into more dirt for the garden bed. They feed the garden bed. This bed right here was covered up in the fall with seeds that had sprouted from the hay that I put in the bed from our rabbits. Well, I covered it up in these mulched leaves and it killed out every bit of that grass and hay that had sprouted. So the next thing that I really like to mulch with, I love using grass clippings. I know it sounds counterproductive, like you're putting grass in your garden bed, but even though we have mostly Bermuda grass here in our yard, we can mow and then I rake it up into big piles. Sometimes I let it dry. Sometimes I put it on whenever it's wet and it just dries in place. Man, it forms a carpet, and for whatever reason, it works great to suppress weeds. That breaks down wonderfully, turns into more dirt. A more recent discovery that I have been using for the last 3 years is pine needles. Just old, dried up pine needles. I have a couple of different resources and places where I can just go rake them up and get them out of the way for free. Man, that stuff does the best job of suppressing weeds and grass. If you go and look underneath a pine tree, you will see that there is really no grass growing. So today, that's what my daughter and I are doing. We're going to my sister's house down the road and we're gathering up loads of pine needles. We call it pine straw. So far, we've mulched the 3 rows of potatoes. We're gonna do a lot of mulching here in this new in-ground garden because it's freshly tilled, which means there's a lot of grass in it. So to keep from having to do a bunch of weeding, we're gonna mulch it and we're gonna use a lot of pine straw because it's what we have available. And as we mow this summer, we'll use the grass clippings for that as well. But pine straw also, man, it really holds moisture. It allows for what little bit of rain we have to seep down through, and then it holds that moisture in the ground. And whenever I water, the water goes right through and then it holds that moisture in. We tried using like wood chips from like a tree service, and our Bermuda grass, it didn't even stop it. I mean, I had a foot thick wood chips and that did not stop it at all. So we're gonna go gather some more pine straw. We've already done 2 loads. We're gonna get more and show you the process, and you can see how well it works as the summer progresses. These are the pine trees here at my sister's house. See how big they are. So yeah, we're just gathering up pine needles to take down and use in the garden. Don't forget to make sure you grab some pine cones for your rabbits. Man, they love to chew on these pine cones. I got quite a few in the scoop, but I'm gonna pick up a few more. I'm gonna stash them right there. I want to show you here at our blackberry row. These are pine cones from like 2 years ago. The pine cones obviously take a long time to break down. These were mulched up high, like to this top row. And you can see that there's still some pine needles left here, but the majority of them have broken down. And last fall, I piled mulched leaves up here too. And you can see that a lot of them are already broken down. The only ones left are these full leaves. So anyways, it's time to mulch again with the pine needles. You can see that we really pile pine straw mulch up really thick around like the base of the trees. And we'll do the same thing around the blackberries to stop any extra weeds or anything from coming up. The trees don't have a problem coming up through them. The berries don't have a problem. If you have plants that are very small or you're still waiting on seeds to come up, you just kind of make a little nest around them, and after the plants get bigger, after your seeds come up, you can go ahead and mulch all the way up close to the bottom. But you can see I have some fresh seedlings coming through. I'm gonna just mulch loosely around it, but so that way they still have room to come up through the mulch, and then I'll close the mulch in around them after they're big. I'm not really 100% sure where the seeds are in this part of the row, so we just laid mulch down kind of in a big oval around it and left the strip of the top of the row so the seeds can pop up through. So kind of a funny story. A friend of mine came to visit the garden one time, and we were walking around and she saw pine cones laying around in the garden. And you can see they're just kind of scattered out in here, and I just leave them. She asked me, what do the pine cones do? I was like, what? I was so confused. She was like, what's the purpose of the pine cones? Do they do something to help the garden? I was like, oh no, they just come with the mulch. I was like, they just come with the mulch, and I don't take them out. I said, I don't know, I guess decoration. One thing to note, I have read and seen people talk about that pine needles is a good way to add acidity to your soil, that adding the pine needles around blueberries is good because blueberries really like acidic soil, but that you really shouldn't add the pine needles around other things, because then you're making your soil too acidic and stuff won't grow. That has not been our experience. I have had great experience with it, even with it breaking down. I don't know if that comes from like using fresh pine needles that are green and haven't dried. We use dried pine needles. I don't know if it's from if you till the pine needles into your soil, which, I mean, tilling anything in that has to break down, if you till stuff into your soil, you're taking nitrogen away from your plants because it uses that nitrogen to break down the things that you've tilled in like that. So that has not been my experience, but I mention it because I'm sure someone will say so in the comments, and I'm sure that I guess it has its basis somewhere, came from somewhere, but that's not been my experience. My stuff grows fine. We've not had overly acidic soil from adding pine needles and then breaking down. And like I said, we've been doing it for 3 years now, and we haven't seen any ill effects. Share it with the bunnies. They like to chew on the pine cones. They also like to throw them around and play with them like toys.